What is going on, guys? Benny here, finally back again. I keep saying that only because I keep running out of time to be able to record. But we are here today to talk about an oldie but goodie headphone amp that I've had for quite a while, since it was released, actually. I don't really remember what year that was, probably like 10 years ago? That's what it feels like. But we are talking about today the Liquid, there, let's see if we can get it in tune here. Let's see. We are talking today about the Liquid Spark. So it's made by Monolith, and it's the obviously Monolith. So yeah, let's get into this little guy after the intro. Alright guys, so we are here today to, again, like in the intro, we're here to talk about the Monolith Liquid Spark. The little, I would say, budget-friendly amp. Because this guy, I remember when it came out, it was $100. And then now it's about $120 to $130 where you can find it now. So I would say that is a great price point for this little guy. So let's go over the front and back of it, and I'll do some B-roll here. But so with that, on the front, from left to right, we have the power button. So this power button, to me, it's a little bit mushy, but it does have, there's a regular power button where you push it in and it stays recessed when it's on. Then right next to it, you have the single-ended output. So if you have a 3.5 millimeter headphone, you're gonna have to use that stupid little adapter we all dislike. And then you'll see that it says Liquid Spark right there. Right under that Liquid Spark, that little hole, it looks like a hole, it's actually a light. So when you turn this little guy on, it'll be a really, really faint red when it's turned on. And we'll do this in the B-roll. I'll show you guys what it looks like when you turn it on. But yeah, it'll sit on the red for a little bit, and then about 3 to 10 seconds, and with that it'll turn white. So it won't have any sound coming out of it when it's red because it's warming up, and then it'll turn white once it's on. And then once you with that, I will kind of, with that, we do have the gain switch right after that on the right side, and then obviously the volume knob. And Alex Cavalli and whoever helped design this as well, they understand what a good volume knob feels like. It's very smooth, like no creaks whatsoever on either end of the minimum or maximum. Another company that does this really well is iFi. So I praise them a lot for this knob feel. So on the sides, we don't really have anything. On the bottom, it does have 4 little rubber pyramid feet with the nomenclature on the bottom. And then we jump to the back. From left to right, you do have only single-ended inputs, so right and left, which is perfectly fine for this price point. And then you have something that at this price point not many people have. They're pre-outs. So being that they're pre-outs, you can use this with powered speakers or to a power amp, which is kind of nuts to think. And then you can use this as a volume control. I don't have any stereo amps in right now to test this. I will soon. So I'll give you guys an update video whether or not that does sound good. But from all the other reviews and other people that have talked about it, they're okay. They're nothing crazy to talk about because obviously this is a $99 unit. But if you do have an external amplifier and you need some type of preamp to use, this is definitely viable because then you can jump between headphones and speakers at your desk, which would be great. And then Also on the very far right, you have the power input, which is DC 36 volt 1.25 amps. So this does have a external power source, which is fine because look of how tiny it is. The big reason they did that, especially when something this small, it helps with noise, electronic noise, so it has a lot less. So there are a couple things. If you guys want the specs, I will throw them up right here, and then you guys can check those out, because there's a couple I'll touch on, but if you guys are spec snobs, check it out. It's not a big deal. Some people are, I'm not. It's fine. Alright guys, so after you've read those specs, right? So a couple of things I do want to touch on with this guy that I do love a lot, that how this was designed. So one of the things that a lot of people touch on is from source to power and to output, there are 0 capacitors. So what does that mean? Why is that a big deal to anyone getting into audio, like being an audiophile? Really what that comes down to is not having capacitors in the way is it cuts down on the noise. And that's kind of a very big deal. So if you're kind of new to audio, what you'll notice is if you plug this in and you have a mid-range source, I would say like an OK DAC, what ends up happening is it won't be as black or dark in the background. You'll hear this like hum, which is kind of what you'll hear on more cheap things, but being that this is a budget amp, this has a really low noise floor because of that, and also the power source not being part of it. So that is a great design. This guy too, he's made out of all metal on every side. The only thing that's plastic that you can tell on here are the power button and gain switch. So in terms of power, how much does this guy put out? 1.3 watts. I don't remember what the ohm range is. I think it's 32, which is fine, because even when you use this gain switch, which I would say for me, I would always leave it on. So the reason being, I'll tell you about that later. But with this, I have noticed that it does sound okay. We'll just get into it right now and then I'll go over the sound. So with this gain switch, so it does sound better with the gain switch on. The one problem is with it is when the gain switch is not activated, I think it's like 3 dB extra. But what it does is it maximizes the amount of power this can push out, right? So it's trying to push out maximum all the time, kind of like a class A, right? But obviously this isn't class A, but with that, what it does is it does open up the soundstage and stuff, which is really strange because it's not really what this is for. But what I have noticed with the few headphones I did test this on, I tested this on my C Audio Bravery IEMs. Most IEMs you don't need to add more gain because they're super sensitive as it is in terms of mid-range IEMs. But yeah, even with that on, you don't have to turn it up much. It's probably like not even like up at all, honestly. But I did notice that the soundstage and imaging did change. So at the cost of that, if you want kind of like a bigger soundstage and a little bit more liveliness to it, you kind of add a little bit more warmth to it, but I think that is a very good reason to use the gain switch all the time. And then also, if you have planar headphones, some are really hard to drive, and that extra bump in power is great. So jumping in after that, how does this guy sound, right? And one of the things, I know I'm fiddling with it a lot, but one of the things with it is, okay, we'll go through bass. So kind of being all over the place tonight. So with bass, I would say this has a decent amount of bass. In terms of how it sounds rich and thick, but not overly, where it like overpowers the rest of the frequency ranges. It basically, what it does is, a lot of headphone amplifiers in this cost bracket and price bracket, they sound a little thin. And the one thing that Alex Cavalli is really, really known for is to have that richness and slight warmth tonality, because it's like, you know, it kind of sounds like it has tubes, which is really awesome. For me, at least specifically for me, I love tubes and the warmth sound. So yeah, this in the bass end, full, sounds really, really, really smooth for, in terms of like speed. This actually is pretty quick for what it is at $100 to $120. I would say it's best in price point for that, because anything else, like I said, they tend to be thin sounding in the lower end range. So when it comes to that, let's kind of jump into the mids. So the mids for this guy, I would say it's slightly forward, just slightly. It's not like where you have a singer or any of the sound where it's like pushing into your head, right? But it does have that little sense of forwardness, which is nice, because then what it does with that is, with anything that you're listening to, vocal, classical, even EDM or anything like that, it has this slight forwardness to keep you engaged. Because I'll get to that in the highs, but yeah, it kind of does this strange, like, I would say, in terms of the frequency range, it has like kind of like a boosted bass, and then it kind of goes up like almost linearly, and then flattens out on the top end. So no, I would say it's more kind of like, it feels like it's a boosted low, and then the mids and then the highs just kind of like trail off and flatten out, not go up. There's no V shape here. But with that, I would say the mids are great because they have that, again, that slight forwardness. And then also with that, this amplifier, when it comes to highs, let's jump into the highs now, because the mids are sweet, and if you have a really kind of like mid singer, in terms of like where they're not like super high in octave or anything like that, like someone like Haley Reinhart, I listen to her a lot. So she kind of has like a mid-range voice and lower like range in how she sings. This amp really pulls it out and sounds amazing. When it comes to the highs though, this headphone amp, it's nothing to write home about. It doesn't do anything like crazy where it turns into like a V shape where the highs are boosted or anything, but it also doesn't lose any of the highs either. So it's kind of middle of the road for that, and I would say perfectly suitable for this price range. because it's like this amp to me is kind of the more musical amp, the more engaging amp. So when it comes to that, like it wants everything to be full and rich, so you have all of the frequency ranges, and you don't lack any of that low end or mid, which is great. And a lot of people love that type of sound, but also a lot of people like that V-shaped sound. But for me, when it's V-shaped and the highs are boosted and the mids are kind of just lacking or just there, there's a lot of energy lost in that. And also when it comes to longer listening periods, like a lot of people love the V-shape and boosted low and boosted high initially, but when it comes, if you're actually listening to music, like let's say you're studying or you're just like playing video games and listening to soundtracks in the background, if you listen to a lot of music that has very harsh or kind of really boosted highs, let's say like EDM, like this can be very fatiguing. So this amp kind of quills that harshness and like smooths the top end out just a little bit, but when it does that, it lets you have longer listening periods, which is great. So in terms of imaging, wow. So in terms of imaging, let's jump into imaging now. So with imaging, this guy does its job. Does really well left to right, very center, and when it comes to soundstage, it's not narrow. It does take on whatever your gear is, really. It does a really good job of that, because when I listen to my arias, first version arias, it does do the big soundstage thing with good bass. And it does, the other thing it does really well is, for it being $99, is depth. This thing has a deep, very good amount of depth for its price point. Completely punches like probably like $100 to $200 higher in depth. Because you can definitely hear when stuff is placed in a room, so a very good image and sound stage. But like there's some, if you have a really good recording, like there's some HD tracks that I listen to just to hear the depth, because it's live. What ends up happening is I can hear the drums in the back. I can hear how far away and like when you close your eyes, you can hear how far away the piano is from the saxophone. And if you're listening to jazz, it's very beautiful on this little amp. So this is why this is probably one of my main daily drivers, because it does it so well at this price point. So what I would have to say in conclusion for this little guy is he's still viable at this price point, because there are a lot of other ones that are just outside this price point that have a lot more features, and a lot more like inputs and also outputs. But in terms of the sound itself, if you want something full and rich and does decently in the highs, but nothing to write home about, but you want that more musicality and less analytical, this I would say is the only amp you should get from $99 to $130. Yeah, so this will forever be my choice for that cost. So guys, with that, I would say if you are looking for a headphone amp that has pre-outs, which is awesome, that's one of the biggest features for me for this, that has pre-outs at this price point that are decent from what I've read, I would go get this guy. I would definitely go get this guy, because it does that love for music factor opposed to analytics. And I love both, but for longer listening and sitting there and chilling, this is the headphone amp I would recommend. All right, guys, I will see you in the next review. It's probably gonna be these guys back here, not the Hekos, but the Ultra and the sound bass. But I will see you guys in the next review. See you guys then. Later.